One of the most important decisions that you're going to make in your weight loss surgery journey is which surgical procedure should you have. And there's oftentimes a lot of thinking and discussion that goes into this decision. Other times it's a fairly simple and straightforward decision. One thing I would really urge you against is to look at one of your friends or someone who works with you or family members who've had this surgery and say, well, they did great, so therefore I want that procedure. I've done thousands of these things at this point, and I really still don't know which procedure is the best. And it's a difficult decision. So I think oversimplifying it, looking at one person's experience, is not a full and complete evaluation of this question. And it's something you should discuss with your bariatric surgeon, as we'll talk about later. I think it's really important to find a bariatric surgeon who has a balanced procedure profile, meaning they don't do all sleeves or all gastric bypasses, that they perform several different procedures so that you can get a more open-minded approach rather than someone who really just does sleeves and thinks, well, we're going to do a sleeve if you're going to have your surgery done by me. There's 4 procedures that are available in the United States. There's the adjustable gastric band, which was very popular almost a decade ago and really has fallen out of favor, and I'd say 95% of bariatric surgeons aren't really doing this procedure anymore. We'll talk about it in a video, but we're not going to go into a lot of depth. It's just not a reasonable option based on what we know about how this device works and what happens in the years that follow having it placed in you. The 2 surgeries that we're really going to focus our energy on are the gastric bypass and the sleeve gastrectomy. These 2 procedures account for at least 98% of all the bariatric procedures performed in the United States, and other countries have fairly similar profiles as well. And then another surgery which I don't personally perform and I will discuss is the duodenal switch, or also known as the biliopancreatic diversion with duodenal switch, which is the most invasive surgery, but it also has the most the best weight loss effects. And we'll address it in a video, and I'll go over it and kind of explain why I've chosen not to offer it to my patients. There are certainly some very good bariatric surgeons who are doing this and are getting reasonable results, but the side effect profile is very significant. And the degree of compliance that's required for eating frequent meals and staying on top of vitamins is a real burden, and something that I think is not right for every patient. And as I talk to these surgeons who are doing these procedures, they certainly agree that you have to pick which patient has this procedure very carefully. So we'll go into that and discuss that as well. But the vast majority of the discussion is going to be focused on either the gastric bypass or the sleeve gastrectomy. Some other procedures that are done in the United States and abroad are the mini gastric bypass, which is really popular in some other countries and may have some merit. It's for some reason it really just hasn't been embraced in the United States, and it's not covered by most insurance policies. There is a movement, and I think it's a reasonable procedure for us to be considering, because it may kind of sit a little bit between that gastric bypass and that sleeve gastrectomy, but there are some inherent flaws in terms of the side effects of the procedure, which are really important if you are considering this, that you fully evaluate. The vertical banded gastroplasty is really an antiquated surgery that hasn't been done. However, in some foreign countries, they still are offering it. I really think that this is a surgery that should be avoided. And then the gastric balloon is new, and I think it's exciting because it can be done endoscopically, but it's not covered by insurance. It's fairly expensive, usually $6,000 to $7,000. And as we've learned about how weight loss occurs and how there's a change in your set point from these procedures, any temporary device like a gastric balloon, once removed, will inevitably result in weight regain. And so I think that's a really important thing to consider for anyone who is considering a gastric balloon device. So when we look at the complication rate, if we're talking about these short-term complications, we've got the lap band right here, very safe. We talked about the duodenal switch, which is the riskiest. And then we've got the gastric bypass, and we've got the sleeve, kind of right here. If we're looking at long-term complications, the lap band goes all the way over to this side of the spectrum, and that's something I'll address in the video, and is I think worth considering. The gastric balloon would also be here on this safe side. However, when we look at the weight loss and the amount and the durability of the weight loss, essentially we see the opposite, which makes a lot of sense. Higher risk surgery typically drives more weight loss. So most weight loss is the duodenal switch. The least weight loss is the gastric balloon. And we'll call it the AGB, adjustable gastric band. Then we've got the sleeve. The biggest issue too with the sleeve is the durability of the weight loss. It probably doesn't last quite as long as the gastric bypass. And then we've got the gastric bypass right here. Better durability, a little better weight loss. Usually this difference is 15 to 20 pounds. Not a tremendous amount of weight loss, but you know, a reasonable amount. Your BMI is really high. It can be as high as 40. If your BMI is on the low end in like the 35 range, we could be talking more like 10 to 15 pounds of difference. I think those are important factors as well. And these are things that we're going to address in a lot more detail in further videos. So let's discuss some important factors in your decision-making process. Some things to consider in terms of the differences between these procedures, and again, we'll go into them in a lot more detail. The amount of weight that you're going to lose, the durability of the weight that you're going to lose, your disease response. For instance, diabetes and heartburn have different response rates in terms of these surgeries, and recognizing that and how these diseases impact your life, and if getting off of insulin is your absolute #1 goal in choosing this weight loss surgery, which is a very reasonable goal, then that should really drive you to choose one procedure over another. The short-term complication rate and then the long-term complication rate. The short-term complications, thankfully, when we're talking about gastric bypass, are really in the 1 to 2% range at this point. We've done lots of these. We've gotten very good. We're tracking our data, we're measuring our outcomes, and as a result, we're getting better and better and better. And we're sharing this information as we work, and there's a lot of collegiality in weight loss surgery. That's one of the things I love about it. And because of that, we've been able to get these fairly complicated surgeries down to a serious complication rate between 1 and 2% for most patients. Again, we'll talk in further videos about when it might be a little higher, and when I work with patients and I recognize that there's some factors that increase the complexity, that's a really important thing for us to discuss. Long-term complications as well. This to me is really probably a more important issue. The short-term complication rate is 1 to 2%, depending on the surgery. We can see 5 to 10% long-term complications. So you're much more likely to have a long-term complication than a short-term complication. And then finally, lifestyle factors. What is it like to live with one of these surgeries? How is your day different? How is it different to eat? What's your GI tract like compared to the way it is now? How are these things going to impact your day-to-day life going forward? Not complications, but really just a change in your existence, your daily existence. So which surgery is right for you? Oftentimes there really is no clear choice, and I think this is a big decision in life, and oftentimes when it comes to big decisions, there's no right or wrong answer. Really, it's a way for you to express who you are and what's important to you. And that's a very, very critical thing for anyone going through this surgery to sit down and think about. Which is more important for you? Weight loss success or disease resolution, getting rid of your diabetes? What about avoiding complications? Some people have some risk tolerance. Other people, very, very risk averse and want to avoid complications at all costs. Lifestyle factors, important for some, others less so. And so recognizing how each of these surgeries can impact all of these factors and then prioritizing it and making the best choice you possibly can is how you go about making this decision.